Okay, I think people are joining in. We'll give it another 2-3 minutes before we can start.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Let's wait for another 2-3 minutes for everybody else to join. Okay, I think let's start the session. Again, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Let me start by telling what LoGeek Nights at Luxoft are all about. So this event was curated keeping in mind the kind of expertise that we have at Luxoft, and this is an effort to share the knowledge gained by our experts to professionals like you. Erstwhile LoGeek Nights, that is pre-COVID times, this was a face-to-face meeting where professionals like you were invited and to listen to our experts, ask questions, network, and mingle over refreshments. But today, you'll be doing all that from the comfort of your homes. So let me introduce our esteemed speakers for this evening. First up, I'd like to introduce Mr. Madhusudan Deshpande. He is MD to Luxoft India, and he'll be talking to us about the journey of Luxoft in India so far. And next we have Mr. Balaji Kumar, who is the senior director, and he heads the digital transformation strategy for APAC region. And he'll be taking us through the kind of technologies we use and the projects we handle in BCM, that is banking and capital markets from India. And then we have Mr. Muthu Kamraj. He'll be talking to us about some real life business use cases that have been implemented. So I give it over to Mr. Madhu. So Madhu, over to you.
Thank you, Pragna. You can hear me well?
Yes, Madhu. Just a second. So I'd like to request all the participants to please drop your questions in the Q&A box beside the chat icon that you see at the bottom of your page. It'll be easier for us to look at your questions and answer them. And as promised, at the end of this session, we'll be announcing the 5 lucky winners. And yeah, let's go ahead, Madhu.
Sure. Thank you, Pragna. So welcome to all of you. It is glad to see so many of you take some time off from your day-to-day work, as well as other commitments that you may have personally, and then join us in the evening to share some of our experiences. And we would like to make sure that it is interactive. I already see that the team or the people who are on the chat, and good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining. Apart from that, these are testing times. I'm sure all of you may be aware and then know what is actually happening in and around us in India. And during these testing times, we continue to stay alert, and we also want to make sure and then wish that you and your loved ones are safe, secure, as well as staying strong, living happy, and make sure that you are able to kind of concentrate on what you want to do, and don't focus on things that are really not necessary to be bothered about, which are happening around. However, please do take precautions so that you're all safe and sound. Yeah, as Pragna said, please do send any queries that you have through Q&A box so that we can focus and then answer to all your questions. If we can answer online, we will do. Otherwise, we'll definitely pick it up and then answer as much as possible. Right? I think, like Pragna said, I joined Luxoft India in 2018 April as managing director of Luxoft India, and I'm sure some of you may have seen the news or read about DXC Technology acquiring Luxoft last year. And I thought it is an opportunity for me to at least give you a brief of where do we belong and what do we do in DXC Technology, and also start and then give you a perspective of what we have in Luxoft India and where we are going from here, right? So with that, just a quick snapshot of what DXC Technology globally is. It's about a $20 billion company with roughly about 138,000 employees. And they also work with close to 6,000 plus customers across the globe, out of which 155 plus are Fortune 500 companies as of 2020. All right. For some of you who may need to know, DXC Technology is combination of Hewlett Packard Enterprise Services, HP Enterprise Services is how it was called before, and the CSC. So these are the two companies that merged together in 2017 and called as DXC. It comes with more than 60 years of innovation and delivering mission critical systems for various customers as HP and CSC. The drive in 2017 to convert this into DXC, DXC stands for Digital Transformation Company. The idea was to make sure that we brand in a way that it is relevant to the market, and then what is our core strengths are, and hence it was regrouped and then termed as DXC Technology Company, right? So with that background, if we kind of like put together what DXC Technology is all about, it kind of represents a complete enterprise technology stack, where DXC has been involved in several offerings and then several horizontals, if we group them into like the IT outsourcing to the cloud and the security implementation to application implementation to analytics and engineering. So when you look at it, the top of the stack, the blue bar or the blue horizontal is what you see is analytics and engineering, which is where Luxoft belongs to. The idea of Luxoft getting into the stack at the topmost level is we bring that consulting and then the digital edge that was required for stitching the complete enterprise from a consulting to the delivery, and also to ensure that we are able to meet the new demands from customer in their digital transformation journey. So we kind of start with the front office and then we front end with the customers for various different divisions where the customer is looking at a digital transformation as one of their key objectives in current world. And we bring all the strengths of DXC together to make sure we are able to help their transformation journey. And then it is divided into several verticals. And in that, Luxoft part is owning two main verticals, that is the banking and capital markets and the automotive as a domain, while the overall analytics and engineering and digital transformation acts as a horizontal across all different verticals that are there in DXC technology. A quick snapshot about Luxoft Asia Pacific region, which is where we are today. And as my responsibility, I also head the overall APAC as managing director for Luxoft. So just to give you the perspective, we continue to grow in APAC. APAC, from a macroeconomic perspective, if you understand, APAC is the region where there has been growth in the last 5 to 6 years, and then this will continue for at least next 2 decades. The growth is in APAC. From a technology perspective, it is led by Japan, Korea, and China, while India is getting into the bandwagon of digital advancement, I would say. And there are several other countries which are looking at the improvement in manufacturing, be it Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, and all that. And then also there are several countries which are engaging and following some of the global standards, from a banking and financial institution, as well as some of the insurance sectors and all that stuff. So eventually, when you look at this transformation or the transition that is happening from west to east, this is the time where the matured industries are moving towards APAC, and hence we believe that it will continue to have a positive trend in the growth journey, at least for the next 2 decades. So with that intro, we have close to around 1,700 headcount across the different countries. We have, apart from India, we do have our delivery centers established in Vietnam and Malaysia. And then we are establishing a delivery center in China, and which is one of the growth engines for us. And if you look at Singapore and Australia, are largely Singapore, Australia, and Hong Kong are largely the client-facing consulting type of organizations for us, which means our people are working at client locations in these regions. So there is the delivery centers are either near shore or offshore, which will be in India, Vietnam, and Malaysia at this point in time in Asia Pacific region. We are in the process of looking at Philippines as well as one more delivery location. So I'm sure we will add that in the near term. Just to give you some snapshot of what DXC Luxoft India. So Luxoft is called as DXC Luxoft now. And we would continue to brand ourselves as DXC Luxoft while we maintain our ways of working, and then while we maintain our own setup and the operations, and then we know what to deliver. And then this has been the success story for us. So we maintain our distinguishing factor of Luxoft. However, we continue to collaborate with DXC in the back end for other services, and then the support that is required from several aspects, right? So as you might have seen, DXC has close to around 6,000 plus customers, and I'm sure a majority of them are looking at getting into the digital transformation within their companies, going from point A to point B. And we see a sweet spot in engaging with them and cross-leveraging the client base, what they have, plus our experience, what we have, to build that story in the digital transformation journey for several of our DXC customers. And hence, we continue to brand ourselves as DXC Luxoft. It is like DXC as one company, and then we are an extension of that company. So that is how we are branding. Just to give you the perspective, so DXC has close to around 40,000 people servicing almost 650 clients, and they are in 8 cities, which you can see in the bottom of the chart onto your left. Luxoft has more than 1,000 people today, and we are servicing close to around 46 key customers from India, I would say. And giving you a little bit of history. So Luxoft acquired a small setup or a company in banking and capital market space, which was into implementing Murex for some of APAC customers from India. That was in the year 2017. So that was the beginning of Luxoft coming to India, and then they started their operations in India in 2017, all right? So from then on, when you look at when in March 2018 for the financial year from 18-19, if you look at. So when we started in March, it was about 103 people is what we had. And then we continued to grow almost 100% year on year. And then today we are 1,000 plus people in Luxoft India as an overall head count. And initially, as you could make out, our only presence when we started was mostly Murex. And then now you see the skill distribution, which is across the several segments, several industries, which is mostly covered in the bottommost table, which broadly caters into large part of banking and capital markets, not only Murex, several other things that we do. The next session, Balaji definitely will cover a lot more on banking and capital markets. So in automotive, we do have certain projects that we are driving from here, mainly on Android and system testing and digital cockpit HMI development. And we have a large team that is established now. In about a year's plus, we have close to around 150 people in digital engineering, which is covering on the data engineering, analytics, and Devops and Scrum Masters and all that stuff, UX, UI, and all that. So these are all several things that we have incubated, and we believe in the company that the 1,000-member team that we have is the core, and on top of it, we can definitely grow multifold in the years to come. So that is a strong feeling that we have. And then looking at the current growth trend, I will not be surprised if we touch easily around 1,800 to 2,000 by end of this fiscal year for us. All right, so why Luxoft, right? So basically what we believe in is to make sure that we engage with our employees when they are onboarded, and then even before they are onboarded. So we believe in actively engaging with our people to clarify if there are any questions that they have, and then we do conduct some sessions with HR and our recruitment team to answer any questions that are there. So we believe that taking those first steps, right steps, is crucial for us to onboard the right kind of talent, because we believe in getting the right talent is the reason why we have been successful so far. And once somebody joins, definitely they are working with the global team of experts, with the highly educated folks across the different parts of Luxoft. And the kind of engagement that they can get with the industry experts, whether it is in banking and capital markets from the western part of the world or in the eastern part of Europe, to what we see as a transition, as I mentioned, the transition to APAC definitely needs that level of expertise and then the maturity. So the team that joins is working with those members who have been in the industry for quite long. And that is definitely a continuous learning process. And then we also see, based on the way we have engaged in Luxoft, we continue to work with the new technologies or the platforms that are helpful in transitioning from legacy or the old time of applications to the new requirements that are necessary for excelling either with customers' revenue, or ensuring that they are able to optimize their costs to build an engine which is going to work well. So that is for our customers. So we continue to work with them on those niche technologies, and we believe that this is something which would help. And as you can see, we are a listening organization, and then we do believe in a flat hierarchy. So there is no bureaucracy to a greater extent that we would want to avoid that. And it is like a startup environment. Everybody can add value and bring that growth to the company. As you can see, we grew 100% year on year. It has been possible mainly because of active involvement of everybody who's been there on that journey. And we, as a leadership in the company, believe that it is going to grow multifold. And I'm sure the people who join will act as the catalyst in getting there, right? And this is basically a quick circle of how it functions. So once an individual prefers to join, so there will be an onboarding exercise that happens, and immediately after onboarding, there are certain HR interventions to know about the person's comfort, any support that is necessary, and then continue to motivate them with several engagement surveys, satisfaction surveys. And we do believe in regular and constructive feedback can help somebody to grow in their career. And hence we prefer and then encourage individuals to engage in a quarterly ongoing feedback with their management, the line managers or the direct managers, and then the annual appraisal cycle. And then we ensure that they develop with several training programs and stuff like that that we do have. Both online and face-to-face earlier, now mostly virtual trainings that are going on. And we have been able to make sure we onboard people with minimal impact because of this COVID situation. So it's been more than a year. If you look at the data, last year, March, when we exited the previous fiscal year, it was we were about 513. And then when we exited this year, that is like March 2021, it was 950. So roughly about 400 plus people we have onboarded, keeping our offices closed, which means that most of those people have started working with us virtually, and then they're engaging with our delivery teams, and they've been pretty successful in ensuring that they integrate ourselves. Though it is not the preferred position and then the preferred scenario for any of us, but definitely it is working, and then we want to make sure it continues to work while we believe and think that our employees are very, very important for the company, and their safety is paramount for us, right? So with that quick introduction and then what we do, I will be more than happy to answer any questions that are there. And in the meantime, I transfer it to Pragya to take it forward.
Thank you, Madhu, for rounding up the pulse of Luxoft so well. Moving on, let's hear from Balaji about the kind of new trends in the digital transformation in the banking and capital markets domain. Over to you, Balaji.
Thanks, Pragya. Am I audible clearly?
Yes.
Okay. So very good evening to one and all. I am Balaji. I head the digital strategy and solutions from APAC. What I'll do is continuing into the overview that Madhu gave in terms of our positioning in Luxoft as a whole, and particularly in APAC and India. I will dig a little deeper into the banking and capital markets. And the primary objective of this session, I saw that some people are asking what's the agenda or objective of this session. The objective of this session is to share with all the audience here our experiences in terms of today, what kind of challenges the banks, the BCM organizations are facing in adopting the modern technologies, the digital technologies, and how we as DXC Luxoft are partnering with them to help them adopt these technologies, right? But before I jump in, I would like to clarify certain terms upfront. So you already know that BCM stands for Banking and Capital Markets. The organizations that we serve, we will call them as clients or customers or banks. So we may interchangeably use these terms. And the interesting point is that even these banks have clients. For instance, we all are clients to some banks, right? So we will call the clients of banks as end clients. Okay, so with those basic definitions, let's jump in. Now, today we live in a world of extremely great digital solutions and technologies. We keep hearing a lot of terms such as continuous intelligence, edge computing, data ops, multiple cloud solutions, and whatnot. We have to look at these clients from the BCM space, where they stand in terms of their ability to adopt these technologies, right? I saw some questions around DevOps. There's a perception that DevOps is just testing, right? Actually, DevOps is a complete subject on itself. And there will be a session after mine where my colleague will give a real life example of how we have actually helped a very large bank adopt some great DevOps practices and the kind of value that it has brought to them, right? So going back to my question, right? Where are banks with respect to their adoption of these technologies? Are they leveraging these technologies with the objective of delivering true value to the end clients? And that's very important because in today's highly competitive environment, it's always the organization that's able to deliver better value to end clients that wins the race, right? So the answer to that question is that the banks are probably on their route to adopt these latest digital technologies, but they are not yet there. Why they are not yet there, right? So let me for a moment take the banking sector. There are many banks which struggle a lot with legacy core banking systems. These are systems that are based, say, on mainframe, or they have been built over a long period of time. So they are very, very coupled, they are monolithic, and we simply cannot modernize such an architecture and make them leverage the modern services that we have on data, cloud, analytics, and so on. So the challenge is that banks are not able to go quickly to market in terms of giving modern services to their clients. Like a simple example would be to give a consistent experience to an end client across different channels like mobile, laptop, desktop, in person, in branch, and so on. The experiences could be very different, right? Because of these legacy systems. If we look at capital markets for a moment, what really first comes to our mind is the trade life cycle. I'm sure all of us do trading in some form, shares, equities. So capital markets organizations, which also I'll call as banks, essentially have a lot of trading activity within. One of the largest challenges they face is that these trading applications or systems have been built over years. They are very disparate, n number of systems, each of them having their own distinct user interfaces, workflows. And to compound to that problem, if you look at the mid and back office systems, these are the systems which have to essentially manage the regulatory risk reporting, treasury and services, and so on, right? And again, if these are very legacy, they are going to involve manual processes. They won't be able to leverage the modern services. And the net result is whether it's a bank, which is a core banking organization or a capital markets organization, they are severely constrained on their agility. They simply cannot quickly churn out innovative features to the clients. And also, it impacts the internal efficiencies, right? The IT organizations of which most of us are part of. We are doing the design and development, support of systems. We are severely constrained on efficiencies if we are stuck with such legacy technologies. Then how can we help banks come out of this stage and transform? That's primarily my focus for the rest of this session. Now, let me also tell you that Pragya has been very clear that I have only so much time. So this is like a complete world in itself, right? So I may not be able to cover all the depths, but what I'll definitely sincerely attempt to do is give a quick perspective and deep dive into certain specific digital technologies. So let's move on, right? Let's take a look at what we call the what, why, and how mapping of the digital transformation journey for clients, right? So let's start with what typically the banks need, what the client needs. Any client would want to be profitable. They're doing business because they have to generate profits. We already looked at the legacy estate issue and the need for transforming the mid to back office. Now, a couple of very important points I want to highlight here is that I think some of you or all of you may know that every bank has to comply to a lot of regulations that the governments and various bodies they enforce, right? So these are continuously evolving standards, right? Every year there may be something new coming up, and banks have to really prioritize that first. And one of the key inputs required to comply to such regulatory standards is consolidating data from various disparate systems within the bank. And that's essentially what the mid and back office systems are trying to do. Now, imagine if these are legacy systems with very complex architectures, how much effort it will take and how much expenditure it will result into for the banks to focus on that. Again, they are getting defocused from their need to innovate for clients. If I take the legacy estate, for example, the banks typically need handholding in couple of areas, right? The first is these legacy systems are supporting the current business for the bank. The bank cannot ignore them. So they need to depend on good service providers like us who can partner with them and ensure that we protect this legacy portfolio, keep it up and running. They also need help in arriving at a target system for the modern architecture, right? The modern architecture that they're trying to convert this legacy estate to. So they need help there. And that's where predominantly most of our digital solutions come into picture. And finally, while all this is happening, they also need handholding in a seamless transition from this legacy estate to this new platform. And that also includes the need to retire these existing applications very seamlessly and successfully. Now, every organization, not just banks, wish to leverage data. Today, we are living in a world of data, right? I spoke about continuous intelligence. Essentially, what it means is that how banks can continuously analyze their own data and take some meaningful decisions, right? I can give some quick examples here. One of the most important requirements for banks is to prevent fraud, to prevent crimes. So they have to analyze all the transactions, all the data on a day-to-day basis to ensure that frauds can be detected and remediated, right? Another example is most of these banking organizations love to observe the consumer patterns on the user behavior patterns for their end clients, and from that look at arriving for new product ideas, right? So data plays such a crucial role, and every organization wishes to leverage data. But the challenge here is that this data is spread across disparate systems, and it's never easy to consolidate them and start leveraging them for taking right decisions, right? Now, all these why, right? The what and the why that I covered, none of this can be fulfilled if the banks do not have a technology backbone, which is an IT organization which operates at pace and scale, which is agile. Now let's quickly look at how we help the clients or the banks realize these objectives, right? From our experience, we strongly believe that banks have to become a digital enterprise. What we mean by digital enterprise? We mean that in the DNA of the bank, there has to be digital innovation. That means a constant endeavor to explore these modern digital technologies, products, and solutions and see how gradually, right, not as a big bang, but gradually, phase by phase, adopt those technologies and then deliver what we call as a digital experience, right? What we mean by digital experience, a lot of us know about customer experience, but just imagine if a bank doesn't have employees who are having a great experience doing their job. It doesn't have partners like us who are having a great experience partnering with the bank. How can they deliver great customer experience? So it's very important that there is a holistic great experience for all the stakeholders involved, and that is what we call as digital experience. And the only way to achieve that is by leveraging the modern digital technologies. And once this is achieved, the bank essentially becomes a set of highly collaborative digital teams, right? So in summary, we would like the banks to become a digital enterprise. So how can we help them achieve this state? Through our portfolio of service offerings. So as you can see here, there are three large categories of service offerings. The first one is our insights and advisory services. As you know, and Madhu also covered, we engage with lot of stakeholders, lot of organizations in the BCM space. So we are always having a very good clarity in terms of what are the latest trends in technologies or domain products and so on. So we actually provide those insights to our clients so that they get an idea about what's really hot in the market today, what kind of technologies are being leveraged. Now, these inputs help the banks arrive at what we call as their digital strategy, right? I would like to highlight one point here that banks which do not first focus on what they want to achieve as a business objective, but rather just focus on adopting certain technologies just because they exist will not succeed. Every technology adoption has to be driven by a business need. The business comes first. So our advisory services help banks to arrive at a digital strategy which is aligned to their business vision. Now, once the strategy is in place, we bring in our digital solutions capabilities. This is essentially the core of digital solutions, the complete spectrum that you see here at the bottom, right from digital architecture, user experience, data, analytics, cloud, blockchain, and so on. Somebody was asking about blockchain in the questions, right? So yeah, it's a complete spectrum of digital enablers, which are our capabilities. And we also uniquely combine these technology expertise with our domain expertise in the BCM space. And we help banks implement these solutions to achieve their strategy. Now, the last point here is how would banks like to engage with partners like us? There are three possible models, and that's what we call as the digital engineering center. They may want the expertise from us. So then we provide the digital capacity, we provide our experts. And we are very proud to say that we have absolutely great experts across the globe in our organization, right? Now, many of the banks would want us to co-own implementation of these solutions. Then we form hybrid teams with them. And yes, there are many banks who also want us to completely own the implementation of this transformation journey, in which case we form autonomous squads. Okay, so in summary, we started with the challenges, the needs, and then we said that the banks have to become a digital enterprise to address them. And then we said that we enable them to do that with our service offerings. And then we gave a complete spectrum of what are the digital capabilities we have. Now, what we'll do is we will jump into three particular hot topics from this. Again, I'll try to cover as much as I can, but I may have to be brief. One, we will cover the digital user experience. Second, data and analytics. And third, cloud. So let's start with user experience. I think this is a term, as I said, many of us already know. Now let's look at a point here, right? Who are the users that we are talking about, to whom banks need to give a great experience, right? We also use a term called personas, right? So there are primarily three types of users. One, the end clients. I think we all understand what that means. Second is, especially for the capital markets, the traders. They play a very crucial role because they perform one of the most important functions for the bank, which is trading, right? And then the third type of user is the rest of the what we call as business user community, who are customers to the IT organization of the bank. And they perform various functions from a business perspective, right? And predominantly their needs are driven towards getting insights into various business related data through various reports. So end clients, traders, the rest of the business user community. Let's take each of them and look at some of the challenges from a user experience perspective. Take an end client. I already mentioned that an end client can have a touch point with the bank up to 5 different types. It could be through post, it could be through voice, it could be in a branch, it could be through a mobile or tablet platform, it could be through a laptop or desktop, through a web interface, right? The biggest challenge that banks face is how to provide a consistent experience across all these channels. I'll take a simple example. I'm sure each one of us would have in some form or shape gone through a client onboarding process with banks when we're trying to open a new account, for example. And the same account creation can be executed through many of these channels. Can the banks provide a very consistent and similar experience? I really doubt. The reason being that each of these channels have their own backend legacy systems, their own processes. So it's a big challenge. Let's take next to the trader community. I already explained their biggest challenge is too many disparate set of trading systems, each having their own distinct user interface, right? Let's take the rest of the business user community. The biggest challenge they have is that their need for the right reports showing the right business information can always be challenged if the banks are using traditional technologies like business objects or Cognos, because any enhancements to such reports will have its own development lead time and the business users have to wait, right? So I have sort of covered the challenges. Now let's look at how we help banks overcome these challenges, right? The very first aspect of addressing this problem is we advise and partner with banks to help them become what we call as a customer-centered organization. What it means is that, I'll give a simple example. When the first time a bank releases a simple application on a mobile for an end client, they are basically providing an appealing user interface to the end client. Now, if the same user interface is very consistently made available across these different channels, then we say that the bank has provided a great user experience to the end client. And now this is just one application with maybe a few set of UIs. Talk about all the services that a bank offers, right? The account related services, the loan services, the investment product services. If they can provide a consistent experience to end clients for all these services across all these channels, then we say the bank has achieved true great customer experience. So this journey from a user interface to a user experience to a customer experience really needs a lot of streamlining of the internal systems, business processes, and so on. And we help banks with our experience to achieve that. What are the two key aspects in this transformation? We have to help banks create products from scratch, or banks also may just want to redesign their existing products. So these are the two key solutions that we provide. So what we do as part of that, if we look at a new product from scratch, there are two very important aspects, right? One, this has to be balanced in terms of being technically feasible, truly addressing the user need, and still being business relevant or business viable. That means it should be cost effective. We have to balance all the three. We can promise the moon, right? We can promise a lot to client, but it may actually incur so much expenses that it may not make a business sense, right? So we have to balance. That is one aspect. The second aspect is many times banks really suffer in arriving at what we call a minimum viable product, which is very essential to ensure that this balance is achieved and quickly we can go to market. And a lot of solutions for this creation from scratch of a product design involves studying the day in the life of these user personas, what we call as customer journeys, and the associated tools to do that, right? Now, if you have to redesign, it's basically taking the existing portfolio and trying to apply some enhancement to it. Like one classic example I can give, again in the reporting world, is a classic business object or Cognos based report, or let's say a bespoke JavaScript based report, can be migrated to the latest technologies like ClickSense or Tableau. And there are a lot of other such solutions available from the cloud providers as well, like for example Amazon QuickSight, Azure Power BI, and so on. Then what happens, we are essentially moving the power of generating the reports the way users want into the hands of users. I'll touch a little more on that in the next slide on data, but that's what we call as redesign, right? So that's how we help banks address these challenges. Very quickly, the journey that we typically follow, our innovation workshops help us jointly ideate new product ideas with the bank. Once that ideation is done, our discoveries and sprints help us rapidly prototype, arrive at the MVP configuration. Then our research and requirements ensure we convert it to a real backlog, a meaningful backlog. Once the backlog is ready, our design strategy solutions help create an architecture, a technical architecture, a business architecture, which meets the three parameters that I spoke about. Then the particular focus is on ensuring the right user interface. And once the user interface is taken care, the services that are delivered with those applications and user interfaces, so that we achieve through our service design solutions. And finally, when we have gone through this whole journey, that should help drive the right visualization, essentially enabling the users to get the right interface, the right reports for them to take the right decisions, right? And we do have our maturity assessment frameworks, which help continuously assess the maturity in terms of whether the bank has truly transformed, has the user experience really enhanced. I know I had to rush through this, but I think this would have given you a perspective, and definitely if time permits, we can always go a bit deeper. Let's move on to the next hot topic, data and analytics. I think almost all of us keep using this. We sleep, walk, drink data, right? Today it's the world of data, big data and whatnot, right? Now, what is the fundamental problem statement for banks from a data perspective? I already mentioned there are disparate data sources. different types of data sources, different systems, right? The first challenge is how to consolidate these disparate data sources into a streamlined data lake. Many times you'll hear the term called as an enterprise data hub. Essentially, what it means is creating that data pipeline which will consolidate the data from these different sources, convert it into a model that is unified, that can address all the consumption requirements from the different consumers of data, and then the further processing on the data, right? I'll come to that in the next section here. This backbone of a data pipeline has to be established. So there are two aspects to it. One, it needs deep domain expertise, because these data models represent real life entities for the banks. So organizations like ours, we bring in our deep domain expertise to partner with the banks and help them consolidate the models from different systems into a unified data model. That's the first step. Once this data model is ready, we have to implement it. And the way we have to implement it is we have to establish this pipeline. And that's where all the typical aspects about ingestion, curation, consolidation, and all that, right, comes into picture, the ETL processes and so on. Now, this can get very complex, and many times banks get stuck with the complexity versus benefits analysis. So if I put in simple terms what the banks need, 4 or 5 very key aspects, right? One, automated ETL processes, right? Second, a visual way of visualizing these data pipelines, and also using this interface to decide the route that the data has to follow, right? Checking for errors through this user interface, right? Providing scalability. Essentially, the data may grow over seasons, the data volumes may come down off season, and so on and so forth. So there is a need to scale in and scale out. And that's where cloud solutions come into picture. We need to have resilience, a failover, and so on. We need to have security, right? The data has to go to the right consumers. So these are the typical requirements, right? So it's basically simplification, automation, and sophistication that's required to handle all these processes. And that's where we have such a wonderful suite of products that are available in the market today. One example I can give is Cloudera. Cloudera is like an end-to-end, right, data and analytics platform which can work on-prem, which can work on cloud, right? And it is based on Hadoop technology, right? So this is something which supports Spark programming, for example. So we can do a lot of this automation using that, right? There are so many products available directly from the cloud vendors: Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Lake, AWS Glue, right? I can just keep going on, right? The key requirement here is to understand the specific complexities and needs of the client, and then choosing the right technologies and products. And this is one aspect that my colleague Muthu is going to cover in his real life example, where we have done something like this and chosen the right technologies that suits the bank. Okay, let me move on. So let's assume that we have helped the bank establish this streamlined data lake. The obvious next requirement is to visualize. The business users will have to see this data, take meaningful decisions. What are the challenges? I already spoke about the traditional technologies, right? So the most important aspect is we should cut the dependency of the users from the IT teams like us to deliver changes to the reports, to enhance the reports, right? So we have to move this power to the users. How do we do that? Through self-service visualization. So technologies and products like ClickSense or Amazon QuickSight, or let's say Azure Power BI, combined with the various cloud solutions, they essentially give this power to users. Anywhere, from any device, in any format, with any contents, they can create the reports. So it's all up to the user. But does it work so simply? No. What it needs for this to work is a very strong data model at the back end. We have to look at different user personas, their reporting needs, and then ensure that the right data models are available. So that's what we call as a data visualization target model, where we have to again apply our deep domain and technology expertise to design these right target data models which will ensure this extensibility, be it an increasing user base, be it a variety of user base, and so on, right? And obviously these reports need to have the right user experience. Okay, so in summary, we can provide this visualization analytics solution by leveraging the great products and solutions that we have in the market along with the domain expertise. Now, once that is achieved, the next step is advanced analytics. And I saw a question around artificial intelligence, right? So what are the key challenges today for a bank to adopt AI ML and advanced analytics solutions? The very first is that it needs a cultural change. Traditionally, users have always based their decisions based on the business insights. Now they have to start taking decisions on their products, on the processes, and whatnot based on data. So becoming data led from traditional business led, it's a cultural change. So obviously, we offer our advisory services and experience to help them make this transformation. The second challenge is lack of skills. I'll be open today in the industry. Not many experts exist who have a unique combination of domain and data science. Data science is a science in itself, completely technical, different algorithms and whatnot, right? Domain, which is very specific to BCM. A combination of these two, many of the banks struggle to have. So that prevents them from adopting such solutions. The third is definitely for AI/ML to work, we need very clean data. The data has to undergo various transformations from its fundamental form, and that is quite high cost, right? And the last but not the least challenge is that many banks are very proactive, do a lot of POCs, right? Prototypes, but very few of them hit production and become production ready AI ML models that drive the day-to-day business decisions of the banks. So how can we solve these problems? There are two solutions. One, we develop what we call very specific solutions for the bank, what we call as bespoke analytics. Obviously, that's something which I can't discuss here because that's very specific to the clients. But we also have this other solution, what we call as out of the box analytics. So what out of the box analytics means is that there is an attempt to see if we can manage AI ML without having a deep expertise on AI ML. So how it is achieved? There are three types of products available in the market today. Machine learning as a service, which is say products like NIME or Data IQ. What they do is they provide a graphical user interface where the users can just drag and drop the various components of the AI pipeline, and then they can execute a part of the pipeline or the whole pipeline. They can review the results based on the different types of data sets, training data set or whatever it is. But it involves a lot of manual processing, not coding. So these are like no code platforms, but they need a lot of manual processing. But still, it's great in terms of having a drag and drop functionality. The second type of solution is what we call as machine learning as a service. So this to some extent abstracts the need for knowledge on AI, right? And these are the products which basically represent a set of cloud-based services, right? For creating the pipelines, for running the algorithms, so on and so forth. Data robot is one such technology, for example. The advantage of that is that a lot of the infrastructure, provisioning, execution, creation of the pipelines, and so on is taken care. And the banks can just focus on the core business logic. So it's one level of sophistication over the manual self-service. What really is like the nirvana stage is what we call the automated machine learning. These are products like say Microsoft Cognitive Services, where there are pre-trained data sets. So AI is essentially what, right? Basically, it is say natural language processing to look at loads of unstructured information, derive patterns out of it. Let's say if a robot is trying to answer customer queries over a call, right? So this robot has to understand what the customer is saying. So that is like speech analytics, right? So these automated machine learning, they have pre-built models. So all we need to do is give them the data, right? We don't need to go through training and all that. This automated machine learning product will give you the final output. So this completely eliminates the need to have AI skills, right? And then finally, developer platforms are what we call ML ops. These are essentially the end-to-end platform to take from development to production AI/ML solutions, right? So Converge.io, for example, Anaconda, these are various products. But I would say this is really the advanced stage. Not many banks are able to achieve this. Okay, so in summary, we help streamline the data lakes. That's the most prominent problem we see even today for clients. Once that is done, we help establish the right visualization and analytics through reporting. And once that is achieved, then we really go into the advanced AI ML, and many banks are still catching up on that. Finally, I'll spend a few minutes on cloud and DevOps. So here, let me, I think there were some questions on DevOps also, so I'll try to answer. Now, I think all of us know this as a service concept. So this has been driving the industry for ages now, right? But we have really reached a stage where absolutely unimaginable SaaS products have come up in the market. What is the primary objective of cloud, right? Number one, cloud provides banks that flexibility to scale in and scale out infrastructure, right? But of late, all the cloud vendors have started providing such wonderful platform as a service and software as a service products that it's way beyond just primary infrastructure scalability, right? So for example, many of you would have heard about the serverless architecture, right? Or let's say the fully managed services to manage containers, for instance. So a lot of the basic infrastructure environment provisioning activities are taken off from the plate of application developers, and the developers can focus on the core business logic. Then why banks are not adopting cloud very quickly? There are primarily three challenges, right? Number one, every bank has a constraint with data. The first thing we have to understand is cloud essentially in its simplest form is a public based infrastructure. Banks under the regulatory obligations cannot move their data to a public infrastructure. So that's the first bottleneck that they face, right? The second bottleneck is that hence banks have to go for either a private cloud setup on premise, or they have to go for a hybrid cloud solution, which is a combination of on-prem and cloud. And whenever it's hybrid or on-prem as a private cloud solution, the complexities are huge because a lot of fundamental work needs to be done on the infrastructure, environment, and so on by the bank. Of course, there are solutions available now like hosted private cloud and virtual private cloud and things like that. But nevertheless, it's always a huge effort, right? So data confidentiality, the complexities of a private or hybrid cloud solution, the last, migrating existing on-prem applications to cloud. It's never easy, right? It goes back to the original challenge where these are disparate applications. We just cannot lift and shift and put them on cloud. So these are the typical challenges. How do we help address these challenges, right? So we have three types of solutions. One, a lot of advisory and assessment, right? So all these challenges will have to be visualized through this portfolio assessment that we have to do. We have to take some very critical decisions in terms of what we need to do with applications. For example, if we look at the data confidentiality issues, we need to look at probably splitting the data models, the data that can go on public, the data which has to stay on-prem, and then design the hybrid cloud solutions around that, and so on and so forth, right? So a lot of advisory will actually do the discovery on the bank's portfolio and then arrive at the required outcome in terms of strategy and vision. And many banks also need our help to assess the different vendors, because almost every cloud vendor, Amazon, Google, all of them actually provide exactly same type of services. So how to align it to their needs. Now, once we have helped them on the strategy and vision, the next step is around planning the migration, right? And one important aspect here is the cloud native architecture design. This is where we decide whether an application just needs to be rehosted, where we can simply lift and shift, right? Or an application needs to be refactored, which is we don't change the functionality, but we may have to little bit change the architecture. Or we have to re-platform. That means change the operating system from on-prem to cloud, or change the language, say for example, mainframe to Java, so on and so forth, right? So a lot of decisions have to be taken on what will be the application architecture in the target state on cloud. So that's a very key aspect. The second key aspect, and that's DevOps, the question that you asked. So DevOps is not just a testing automation, right? DevOps today combined with cloud gives the power to banks to end to end improve the efficiencies of their product development. Why does it? Because of the kind of different product services that are available. And this one question, I leave it to Muthu to answer in the next session, because you can see live how we have come up with a great DevOps and cloud based solution delivering value to clients. So please hold on till then. You will get a lot of answers from that session. And finally, once we have the migration roadmap ready, we help them deliver and transform. So in summary, right, if the audience on this call is interested to know what are the technologies and skills to focus, if we have to make a career in today's world, these are some of the most hot, popular technologies. It's not an all comprehensive list, but in our experience, we have seen that these typically rule the world, right? And if you are able to pick one or more skills out of these technology set, it's guaranteed that it's going to be an interesting journey for you in today's modern world of digital solutions. So with that, I thank you for your patience hearing me, and I hand over to Pragya.
Thank you, Balaji. That was a very insightful session, and thank you for explaining it all in such simple and clear terms. So the next session will be by Muthu Kamraj, and whatever Balaji spoke to us, I think you'll be able to apply that through Muthu's when he talks about the business cases. So Muthu, over to you.
Thank you, Pragya. So good evening, everyone. So I'm Muthu. I'm basically a DevOps architect and a cloud consultant. So the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'll walk you through the digital feature enablement that we have provided for the customers in terms of DevOps, cloud, and full stack services. Yes, let's go on. Yeah, as you see this picture, so we have been, assisting customers in implementing and setting up the DevOps infrastructure as well as the cloud services. And so basically, all as Balaji was explaining in his previous slides, like customers, especially when it comes to bank, they are not ready to go to cloud, or sometimes they want to do hybrid infrastructure where they want to keep both cloud as well as the on-prem infrastructure for some security reasons. Yes. So even here,
Muthu, hi. Sorry to interrupt. Can you please be a bit louder?
Yeah, sure. So fine. Is it audible?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the question. So fine. So as I said, like we have been supporting customers to build both DevOps as well as the cloud infrastructure, and we have our DevOps infrastructure installed and configured in on-premise service. So we are using our Red Hat Enterprise Linux service, which is at version 8. That's the latest. And so you see here, we use Jenkins as a core tool here to do a CI/CD. So basically, the continuous integration and the deployment is taken care of by Jenkins, and we use a lot of tools which has been integrated with Jenkins. So you see there, you can see Bitbucket. We use that for source control management, and JFrog. We use Artifactory and X-Ray. So Artifactory is used to download and upload, or just basically store the artifacts and the libraries that is needed for our application to be built when we build using Jenkins basically. And we also use JFrog X-Ray, and the reason for using X-Ray is because we are using Docker. All our Docker images, when it gets uploaded to Artifactory, it has to go to a scan. So that scan is done by X-Ray basically, and it just quarantines if there is any issues in the particular image. And we also use Sonarqube to check the quality of a code, basically to identify the bugs in the code.
Muthu, is there a way you can speak up a little louder, or maybe you hold the mic closer? Your voice is very, very feeble.
Okay. Maybe just a moment. So I hope this would be audible.
Yes, Muthu.
Yeah, thank you. So Fine. So as I said, we are using Sonarqube to do the analysis of our code and also do the code coverage. So we are using some plugins like Jackaco, Kobuchura, depending on the applications. Basically, we are using Java-based applications, and we use these plugins to basically test the code coverage of a particular code that we are just can to via Sonarqube. And we also use IBM's product, which is AppScan, and that we are using to do the security testing for our web applications. And when it comes to the ELK, which is Elastic Logstash Kibana, so it's basically the Kibana dashboard that we are using to analyze our logs, the metrics, basically to analyze the performance of the services and even for some of the servers that we are running the data. That's about the integration part. And when it comes to the software that we use as part of Jenkins, we are using Jenkins Agents. That is the platform where we trigger the jobs or the actual job is getting executed. So when we look at the agent, which is running Podman, we are using Podman for our container ecosystem. Yes, we don't use Docker because for some reasons that I'm going to explain in the next slide. Yeah, we use Podman here. So we are using Podman to basically build our front end and back end components, and we use, as you see, we use for front end we use Node.js and React.js, and we're using npm as a package manager, and for backend we're using Spring Boot, Java, and also for testing we use Selenium. So for this we are using Maven to build it. So all these has been put inside the container, and we generally involve writing some kind of Docker files, which we call here as Podman files, and we used to have all the softwares inbuilt in it, and we just build it and upload to Artifactory, so that whenever we want to deploy, we can simply pull the image and deploy it in a container orchestration where we are using Elastic Kubernetes service here. So that's in our AWS cloud. And you see here, we are also using Terraform. So we ran Terraform in one of our Jenkins agent, and we use Terraform to basically build or deploy the AWS infrastructure. So we usually have all the scripts like bootstrapping scripts and also the Terraform related scripts kept in a big bucket. So it is very easy to build infrastructure because what we need to do is just pick the configurations that we have it in our bucket and run the specific job in Jenkins, and that would do the rest of the things that is going to build your infrastructure in AWS. Example, if you see the services that we use here is over here because we use Lambda for deploying some of our applications, which is basically a serverless deployment. And we also use Elastic Kubernetes Service, as I said, to deploy most of the containers. And we are also using some DB services like RDS DB, where we have deployed our Oracle database, and we also using Aurora DB for our Postgres SQL services. And Aurora DB is also integrated with Kinesis Stream in AWS. Kinesis is a service that is going to provide you faster streaming of data when it comes really to the production. And we are also using some of the EC2 instances. When I say EC2, it's not like tiny instances. We are using extra large and large instances, like memory optimized or disk optimized, because we have some kind of dedicated applications which cannot be containerized for some reasons, and those have been migrated to these instances and running there. So all these things could be easily done with Terraform, and that's the reason we are using Terraform here. And when you go, we are also using Ansible. So Ansible we are using for configuration management. So for example, if you want to upgrade the version of certain components, let's say Bitbucket version or Sonarqube version that we use here, so or even to upgrade a server, we for all this purpose we are using Ansible, and that is also running as an agent in and sometimes we update or upgrade softwares in Jenkins as whole by using Ansible. And we have, as I said, we have been deploying all our containers in Elastic Kubernetes services, and we are using kubectl in order to just run the deployments via the kubectl. And when it comes to OpenPass, yes, something that is an area where we are still exploring, because we are trying to deploy our Lambda-based applications in Kubernetes, So for that, it is not directly, it's not straight away possible, and we are just exploring with OpenFast in order to make those Lambda-based application compatible to be deployed with EKS. And that's about it. And we are using S3 bucket in AWS in order to store our artifacts, part of AWS services. And for the backend storage, we are using VBS storage. So these are the services that we predominantly use in AWS. And we are still exploring, as I said, to deploy Lambda to EKS with OpenFast. So, and the more important thing is the AWS Direct Connect that we are using to connect uh, from AWS Cloud Service to our on-premise service. So that's all about it. But this is not the entire picture, as you see, because we have been facing a lot of challenges in the past. So, like for example, using Elastic Kubernetes services, and also to adopt Podman when there was Docker in our infrastructure. So why we migrated? So I'm just going to just explain something about the architecture decisions that we have took in order to arrive at this picture. Let's go. Let's go to the next slide. Fine. So these are the architecture decisions that we have took in order to have a better continuous continuous improvement, I'd say. So yes, we have first migrated from Docker to Podman because we have a problem with Docker because Docker doesn't support rootless operations. When I say rootless, an ability to run, create, or deploy your containers with your regular access, not with root access. And in actual business, what we felt was like we are using a lot of components in our applications, like an upload file upload component or the exposure component. Basically, the exposure component is going to load data to the file upload, and file upload is going to upload that to the um, data nodes where we really have the information about the applications. So for that example, when we are running, when we are using a Docker container framework before, problem is like we have to have root access, and without root access is something, I mean, for example, if you're running deploying an application with normal user access, then that definitely a permission issue. And what happens is like when the upload service is trying to upload the data, then the exposure monitor is trying to load the exposure, then because of the different permissions on these components, it is ejecting and it's going to fail that time. And for to ensure that this is not happening, we have to every time go back and check that all our containers are having proper permissions and it is properly configured with this particular user and all those things. That's really hectic for us to do each and every time. So what we thought is like a way where a container to be created and deployed with any account, not just root account. And that's one big advantage that we got from Podman, and we adopted Podman. Now it is like it doesn't matter like whichever user used to run their containers, they can use their own account and still run the containers. One more thing is it is easy to generate the configuration files using Podman. Like when, for example, when we want to deploy your, for example, you have created your container, you created your image, and you want to deploy your image to orchestrator like let's say Kubernetes that we are using here. So in order to deploy that, what happens is you need to write your deployment configuration files every time for each and every component. Though we have templates, it's again a manual task. But what I would say, like when we start using Podman, it is easy for us to generate because Podman has inbuilt commands to generate all those configuration files. So you just need to run those commands, mentioning the container name, and it's going to create a container. I mean, create the deployment configuration for you. And with that, you can simply go and deploy that in your Kubernetes infrastructure. That's one advantage that we got. And the other thing is, yes, we have been using JavaScript before, and what we felt was there was a lot of performance issues when it comes to loading in the browser. And when we are using an application like active UI application that we use for loading some of our data nodes or query nodes, so it is taking a lot of time before. I'm saying not now. So there's a lot of time because the browser loading itself is like too slow because of using some scripts, legacy systems that use JavaScript. Now we have migrated to Node.js, and we are also using React.js for our applications, to run the applications. So there is a lot of improvement because the performance, because we always have SLA for the loading times of each and every these data in our UI. And when we start using React and Node.js, it's pretty bit faster when compared to JS. And yes, I would say there are some cases where we are seeing slowness, but it is not due to those applications, it's because of some infrastructure that issues that we have. And yeah, coming to migration to AWS cloud, yes, as Balaji mentioned before, we also had the same, our customer that we are working with also have the same idea that it is not, better to go to cloud because we have a lot of dependencies and we can't keep our data in third-party cloud services. So later, yes, we had a lot of calls and we have taken a decision to move our infrastructure, on-premise infrastructure to AWS. Not completely, but yes, certain services that we don't feel it is good in the open source, we have moved to AWS. So basically, when I say infrastructure, like say let's take provisioning of infrastructure. Say let it be a server, or it could also be a database. So it actually takes at least 1 week or 2 weeks sometimes to build a infrastructure with some servers and build a database server, let's say Oracle, and do the testing, connectivity, and everything. But yeah, with AWS, of course, as I said, we are using Terraform, so we just need to go to Terraform, just pick the configuration that we need at that time, and then trigger the job that is going to create the infrastructure, right? That is something that we really see beneficial. So, for example, we are using a bi-weekly release model. So we also have a kind of nightly deployment where we have to deploy our all the core components in infrastructure and test it. So that is going to be that was slower before when we're using our on-premise service. As I said, that it takes a lot of time to build our infrastructure. But now with AWS, it is like we keep moving as fast as we can. That's one big advantage that I would say we have got out of AWS. And yeah, in terms of backend, we have also migrated from Spring to Spring Boot. And one fantastic functionality that Spring Boot provides us is to break down our monolithic application to microservices. Because we have been in a phase where we really stuck to, though we have all these container platforms or the ecosystem that we already adopted to use containers, we were able to only break down or create a new application and containerize it. Because of some reason, hurdles that we had with Spring, we are not able to containerize entire applications. And while adopting Spring Boot, it just had the flexibility because we just need to maintain the business logic and just take out the controller configurations. And in that way, we have been able to break our monolithic application to microservices. And within a span of maximum 3 to 4 months, I think almost 60-70% of our application has been containerized now. Though not all, because there are certain things that we are still exploring about in order to containerize them. But this it has helped us to really move faster when we started adopting the container ecosystem. And when coming to yes, Kubernetes, that's a deployment a deployment orchestration that we use here. Before we are using OpenShift container platform. That is also a fantastic platform when you consider about deployments. But the problem is about license because every year we saw a considerable increase in license, and we thought of exploring something new in the market. That time we start adopting Kubernetes. Yes, we are using Kubernetes or installing an on-premise service. But yes, there it was fine for certain period of time. But after that, we started facing some issues like the instability that we saw with our control planes in Kubernetes. Though we have multiple worker nodes and we have scaling options enabled for all the worker nodes, the problem is like the control plane sometimes goes down, whatever you do, and it is like it's quite hectic to monitor the control planes every time, and especially when it comes to production, we have all SLAs, and it is like we can't go and fix those issues at that time. So later, what we thought is we moved to decision 6, that is, we move our Kubernetes applications to EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service. Since because AWS provides the services for Kubernetes, and it's like hassle-free maintenance of our Kubernetes environment because it's been we just need to do is we need to just mention some 4 things that we need to have for Kubernetes, like what are the worker nodes that we want, what kind of deployment we need to maintain and all those things, and just deploy it and it is ready. So after that, what the only thing that you should be concerned about is how to write your containers, how to deploy it, and you just focus on that, so that we need not bother about anything that to handle in terms of administration. And yes, that is really awesome, because we are now able to easily maintain, and there is no issues at all in our production, because we have our we have separated out our worker nodes in multiple. That way, it is also like redundant. Like there's, I mean, there is no issues at all, I would say. And that's all about the challenges that we face, and this is how we fix it. And one thing I wanted to say is like we don't go and adopt the tools which is familiar in market, because we do analysis because before we do, because example, when we adopted Podman, we didn't choose any other tools. That time I think Docker Rocket was also familiar in the market, but we haven't picked it because that doesn't solve a use case, right? So there's only Podman which has the facility to uh, have your application run in rootless mode, and easy way of generating the configurations. So these things only Podman provided us, and that's the reason we adopted Podman. And when it comes to Terraform, we choose Terraform. We didn't use like CloudFormation template, which is already available as part of AWS. But the reason we chose is because today we are using AWS, and tomorrow we might move to a multi-hybrid cloud infrastructure where we can adopt Azure or Google Cloud Platform. So that time it is going to be very easy when you use Terraform instead of migrating the entire thing from CloudFormation. So that's the way we think. That's the way we work with customer, and first through that these things works, like proof of concept, and then implement it. We're really happy customer that we have because of questions. So thanks a lot for the patience.
Thank you so much, Muthu. So we'll quickly take 5 minutes to answer the questions, and then we'll move on to the winners and close the session. So Balaji and Muthu, if you guys can take a look at the questions.
Yes, I've been trying to answer as much as I can. So I think there are quite a lot of questions around, say, what frameworks, tools, technologies apply when it comes to these various solutions, right? So my answer to that will be it data, be it cloud, be it user experience, we can never say that one size fits all, right? So as Muthu was also explaining in his presentation, right, we always have to start with the vision for the client. What are they trying to achieve, right? And this could be a mix of so many different parameters: cost effectiveness, quicker implementation times, scalability for future, so many things, right? And once we consider all these factors, we evaluate the different products available in the market. Now there are sometimes cases where uh, there is a very pressing need based on the current architecture of the client. Like for example, the client may have a lot of, let's say, Windows based systems, and they are trying to migrate to cloud. So a lot of times going for Azure based solutions make a lot of sense, because they can get cost benefits from Microsoft because of their existing base. The migrations can become simpler because there are various tools available, and so on and so forth. So I would say that there is no single answer. It is very context driven, depending on the problem statement for the client. Let me look at chatbot specific to banking. Uh, well, so what I would say is any kind of bot solutions basically involves different types of analytics. It could be text analytics, it could be voice analytics, applying analytics to loads of unstructured information. So the fundamental principles would be same, whether it's a bank or it's a non-banking domain. But what becomes a bit different is these specific terminologies which are related to the domain, right? So that customization may come in, but generally the technologies applied definitely are the generic AI/ML technologies. And similar products like Microsoft Cognitive Services can be actually used across any domain. Okay, let me say. We have AML module to industry, but actual, okay. Yeah, well, I do agree that AI ML has a lot of hype around it. And as I mentioned during my earlier articulation, right? That it is still in a POC mode for many of the banks. And I think where it's being leveraged a lot to start with is number one in the customer care, customer support, because there we can have some very simple voice analytics to support some basic FAQs. And I think we all have seen that, right? Even in India, we have seen chatbots being used for many of the banks. The other area where I have seen it very commonly used is when we have to create patterns of knowledge, right? In today's agile world, it's not necessary that everything is absolutely structured, documented, like we used to do in the traditional era, right? So when we have these different application logs coming in, these different ticketing systems, it could be Jira, it could be, say, ServiceNow. So a lot of natural language processing on the unstructured information that comes from these different domains, identifying patterns of knowledge and creating knowledge repositories which can be used for upskilling, cross-skilling the IT workforce. There also definitely AI/ML solutions have been seen as prevalent. Now, there are, I see specific questions around technologies, right? GraphQL and things like that. So again, what I would say is that there is no all comprehensive list of these are the technologies which are in demand, right? Now, we have presented here a few that come from our experience, but what I would definitely say is this is representing the majority of the technologies that are in demand, but doesn't mean that any other technology is not in demand, right? It all depends on the specific context of the client. Let me see what else we can answer.
Balaji, time for another question. One question.
One more. I see a lot of questions around AI, so I'm assuming we have answered. Okay, let me just take this one question around DevSecOps, right? So what we mean by DevSecOps is basically it's an extension of DevOps to inbuild the security checks in our delivery pipeline. So today, again, there are a lot of products which can, for instance, scan the applications, the entire application ecosystem for vulnerabilities, identify the red flags, and so on and so forth. So rather than following the practice of implementing, all the software changes and then running it through a scanning software, these SecOps tools, they are inbuilt into our pipeline. So it could be like every time a check-in happens, the entire pipeline is triggered where there can be a vulnerability scan done. So very early in the life cycle of development, we can identify these vulnerabilities and fix them rather than wait for the development to complete and just take it up during the testing stage. Yeah, Pragya, probably that's pretty much what we can answer.
Thank you so much, Balaji, for taking the questions. So this brings to the end of the session. Thank you so much for your patience and your enthusiasm, as we can see in the Q&A box. So I will leave you with the 5 winners that we have chosen for today. So first up is Bino. Please excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your names. So Bino, Ritesh Roshan, Selani Mohammed, Arshi Nagpal, Veera Raghavan. So congratulations, guys. Yeah. So we'll reach out to you on your email IDs for to take this up further. Thank you so much. Hope you had a great and insightful session, and have a good rest of the evening. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the great enthusiasm. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you, everyone.
And thanks for your time. Thank you. Bye.